Hello everybody, I just wanted to give you a quick update before we hop into the video on how exactly this episode of 4x3 is going to work and episodes in the future. Basically the gist of this concept was that we get one guest here alongside Paladin, Neo, and myself, and we basically ask statements that you will see on the top of your screen there. And then we have a spectrum with our faces down below where we will kind of fall along the spectrum there. So from on the left is strongly disagree to the right, which is strongly agree. You'll get to throw our answers down, and hopefully it'll bring up some really good debate, really good discussions here. And yeah, I hope you all enjoy the concept and the video. Make sure you all like and subscribe if you do. Hello everybody, welcome back to the first episode of 4x3. I am Cole Exner McHenry. I'm joined here by my my lovely co-stars here in Neokai, that Paladin of course, and then we've got our guest for today, and Dinko or Adam. Really looking forward to having you on for our first episode here. It's a pleasure to have you. Last seen on the Dallas finals if I'm not mistaken, so
yeah, I think so.
And I guess you did the 1x. What was that called? It was something.
If you last seen me doing sort of an event with Elige, that was the one. That was the last one actually. Now to remember. But yeah, it's great to be on the show. You guys, it feels like you guys are actually 4x3 with your cameras, and I'm 16:9. I feel very far away.
Yeah.
I'll sit further back. Don't worry.
Yeah, but thank you. More. We've even got the IKEA thing going on here as well.
Oh
I
yeah,
like that.
oh yeah. I just
There we
noticed.
go.
Nice.
You're on the same wavelength, and the mic as well, which you can't really see, but I got the same one. It's got to be done.
Nice. We're basically the same person. I'm ready to go.
Cool. Yeah, so I kind of want to describe the premise just a little bit before we hop into it. I'll probably do a little video before this with maybe just myself, but this is going to be a show where we bring up 3 separate topics, and we're going to be talking over them, discussing them, and we have a little bar on the bottom of the screen there that's going to put us on a line of where we agree or disagree. So 3 statements come up, and then we all discuss it. So hopefully it'll get some good debates, some good topics here, and yeah, looking forward to hopping right into the action. So let's just go ahead and kick it off with our first statement. I know we got a little sneak peek about this one, trying to introduce things, but first statement that I've got for you all is Elige will move complexity to a playoff team, and Dinko, because you're our guest here, I'll go ahead and let you go first on whether or not you agree or disagree.
Well, it depends, because you add some context into the situation. You know, what are we talking here? Which playoffs? Are we talking big events like Colognes, etc.? Are we talking smaller events, local events? You know what? Because definitely going to be seeing a trajectory upwards when it comes to some of the smaller tournaments the complexity attend, like for example the challenger events that we've seen them went to last year. So definitely going to see them probably make playoffs of those kind of tournaments. So I'd definitely edge myself towards disagree, but more just touching the sort of orangey color on that board, because for me it's definitely going to be an improvement. I think Bald Elige, it's a new arc. He's coming here to save complexity, and he's gonna lead them to a few playoffs of challenger events, and that's going to be his legacy really cemented.
There you go. All right. That's a bold call right there. So a little bit disagree, but I think it's more so just the different events that we're going with. Now Neo, you can go ahead.
Sure, I'm gonna go way further left, not all the way left, but like I'm going like a real kind of dark orange, light red kind of thing. Yeah, far left. What can I say? Honestly, go more left.
Wow.
There we go. About there.
No faith.
There. No faith. This is a conversation that me and Manny have already sort of had on our podcast. We spoke about it, and I was very adamant that I just don't think this instantaneously makes complexity a good team. I mean, I think obviously there was some pretty fundamental problems with Fang, and we could all kind of see it from the outset, struggling both in and out the server. But I think for me, this is a Elige who's coming off the back of not even probably, the worst year of his career ever. Plain and simple. Worst stats, worst performances, worst impact. And he's coming into a team which already kind of has all these kind of underlying problems already when it comes towards playoff runs. I mean, we look at kind of recent Challenger Leagues where Melbourne, for example, which was an awful run from them. Granted, no one really played well in terms of the big hitters, but they were arguably favourites to win Melbourne, and they completely bombed. And for me, this just doesn't seem to solve the problems of what is complexity. I think there's probably other changes that need to be made to make this a good team, but I don't think Elige is a fix-all. I think he'll bring a lot of good things to this team. like experience and of course his ability to play at that top level. But I don't think in terms of him alone, he can carry this team to playoffs, and they do need someone who can step up and make a big difference. So for me, I'm not a believer that this is the be all and end all complexity in our top team. I don't think they'll make top 10. I just outright stand by that. I don't think this is a team that are going to be a top 10 team. Top 15, even then, it depends on how many tournaments they're playing in and how well they do. But I don't think this is going to make them a playoff team in my eyes.
All right, Ani, I need you to I need to back up NA for a second here. Where are you lying on this?
I will be backing up NA here. We will go like slightly to the right. Not maybe a little bit more, but like
okay.
that's about it. Yeah,
not too far.
I think I'm not gonna go all the way on Elige, but I do think that he did need a huge change of scenery. I think that his time on Liquid did need to come to an end. Changing roles that many times clearly did a number on his career. At least just for that year in particular. But I think moving to a complexity with 4 young players that really are hungry, that want to win, but just haven't had that last little bit of a hump to get over, with kind of expecting that Fang would kind of come onto the scene as hard as he was way back when in like 2020 at that FunSpark event where he had that MVP. Since then, he wasn't really performing. And if you add Elige back into that situation, I don't know, that makes me a little bit more excited that now you actually have a pretty reliable core in Elige, Grim, and Halzerk. And at this point, you've got to call into question, is JT a good IGL or not? But as for right now, I feel like he's serviceable enough. But there were so many situations throughout the last season. You know, there was a best of 3 against FaZe, best of 3 against NAVI, where, you know, they were on the cusp of being top 3 teams, but just couldn't get it done due to weak mentality. Oh, actually, they had a BO3 against VP as well, to qualify for playoffs. So I think there was a lot of situations where complexity could have.
Is Elige gonna fix the mentality things?
Yeah, come on.
That's a question I have. Is like,
so
what has been a big problem of Team Liquid's history? It's been their sort of brittle mentality. I wouldn't say Elige is kind of like a behemoth of mental strength, but certainly a lot more experience, perhaps. But I don't know if he's gonna.
Right. I definitely. I think I agree in that sense. I think it's more so just like the fact that he's won championships is kind of where I'm looking at, where he knows what it takes to win. You know, he knows what it takes to kind of put in the work to actually become that Grand Slam winning Liquid. And I think just trying to give that kind of drive towards some of these other players who kind of need a kick in the pants as of right now. I think a lot of these players are just very demotivated after coming so close to beating all of these top teams, that having an experienced player like Elige come into the lineup actually feel like, oh, you know, maybe we can do this. Maybe we can beat some European opposition. And I mean, I thought there were some decent signs at the Blast groups with that win over NIP. And I don't know if they're gonna make playoffs, particularly just because the field has gotten much stronger now with all of the moves that have come through. That, you know, the fact that they were close to making playoffs last season was more so because there was just a really weak field and they could have capitalized on a lot of weaker teams. It'll be harder for them to do it now, which is why I'm not all the way on the other side. But I do think that this is a significant improvement over Fang. And now that there's a reliable core of fraggers, I think that they can play just much more aggressive. I think they can fit their identity a little bit more and start to win more games against EU opposition, which is kind of why I'm more on the green end here.
Yeah, I'm a lot more positive about this version of complexity, but it's when I refer to the question, Elige will move complexity to being a playoff team. I don't know if it means consistently or a playoff here and there, because I certainly feel like with this team, they are certainly going to be a better team. There's no denying that Elige for Fang is a significant upgrade in every sort of facet of the game. But when you look at being a playoff team consistently, I don't think so. I just don't think complexity are good enough across the board to do that. But I think that they will be able to slip through the playoffs here and there. Technically, they have already made it to like a knockout stage, right? With the Blast groups, like that's technically already through. So already maybe he's already surpassed that, but I don't think it's going to be a really consistent contender team. I think there may be one. I think JT probably is the player that you'll kind of hit the ceiling eventually with him.
Agreed,
and I think that's my problem.
Yeah, I mean, just to piggyback off that as well, like when I was talking about strongly disagree, I'm talking about whether they're consistently a top team. Obviously, any team can make a run.
I'm saying consistently, like playoffs here, because yeah.
Then send me
and like big events as well.
Send me off the scale at that point.
Yeah, if it's consistency, I think they can make the odd one, whether it's kind of a tier 1.5 tournament, like like challenges.
I would say
they should be making it every time.
I would say like we're talking like I'm not gonna say Cologne, right? Because that's obviously a tough ask out of the gates. But I'm saying like they probably make a few Pro League playoffs. They probably make like maybe a Dallas or Sydney playoff, something along those lines.
Okay, but like what consistently though? You're talking about
yeah.
a team who
not like every time,
because
because I don't think that's too reasonable for a lot of teams for that matter. But
is that consistently? I don't know.
Exactly.
Like when I look at the rankings overall, let's just look through some of the teams they would have to beat to get into the playoffs, right? You have Heroic, Vitality, FaZe, G2, and you even have some of these like outlier teams coming up. Like we don't even know how good Cloud9 are going to be. We don't know how good Liquid will be down
Astralis
the
are playing
line.
hella good these days as well. Like they're starting to find some consistency.
Definitely solid. I'm excited about Mouse as well. So it's just difficult to see them breaking through that pack of teams consistently get into the playoffs. I just feel like there's too many hurdles for them to slip up on. And I think, yeah, sure, the positive signs of Blast are maybe going to fill them with a bit more confidence, especially for the North American players playing alongside Elige. But I'm sure Grim has experienced what it's like to lose alongside Elige. And I'm sure he doesn't really want to relive that experience. So I'm excited to see how good Complexity can get, but I don't think it's going to be to the level where they become a consistent playoff team.
I think Ani said it quite well. I'll move my head as we go here. I kind of got convinced a little bit more by you guys and by my standards, because I think like obviously making playoffs is going to be difficult consistently for this team, but they've come so close in a couple of like events. Obviously they've had some pretty miserable runs in the mix there as well, but they've had some like tough spots, right? I think like one of their biggest cases was, you know, how close they were able to come in Katowice this year. They absolutely like they almost made it to the playoff stage, and I think that's like a key there, especially when you come in with like a player who out of the gate I think is going to motivate everyone else to want to win more. Like Elige is going to bring that energy.
It's so sad just how far they fell off that cliff, though, because it was really exciting. You know, we're coming into Pro League right after the sort of Katowice performance, and I think everybody's kind of high on Complexity for a bit. Maybe not everybody. There's definitely some chronic doubters, but when you look at the team overall, they were even really confident. I think they just got more demoralized with every loss that they took at Pro League. From you talking to some of the players, they would come in, they would win the first map, even of a best of 3, and you feel like, okay, they're going to do this, and then they just drop the ball. They just crumble mentally, and they never really were able to get anywhere near the form that they had at the start of the year. So yeah, Elige coming in hopefully is a little bit of a reset to that, but they've got to get the momentum going quickly. Although I don't think they can. I think their best chance to perform well is early in this season, where the other teams haven't got it together yet and they haven't made a significant change, right? Just one player coming in, and that player is a clear upgrade. So for me, the best chance for Complexity to do well is in the early stages of this season, before the likes of NAVI get their legs under them, before these teams that will be in the decider games of the last games of groups like Mao's, etc. Like before they all get it together and click, I feel like this is the best chance for Complexity to get some of those wins.
So do you think with their kind of like, I would say, rougher performance in like the fall groups, that it might be like a little bit too late already, or do you think they can come back in Cologne?
I think that they can, because at this point, I'm sure a lot of teams, most of the teams, in fact, attended Blast groups thinking that's a bit of a boot camp. It doesn't really matter where we fall at the end of the event, whether we go to the showdown or to the finals. Of course, they would love to just qualify for the LAN outright, but I know Liquid was very, very big on just, this is just a boot camp for us. It doesn't really matter. And I know Complexity, they're trying to implement Elige into a little bit more of a secondary caller, mid-round caller for the team. And I think that takes a little bit of time as well. And so I think, as far as they're concerned, if I was in their shoes, I'd feel pretty comfortable that, like, you know, we're seeing an upward trend against some EU opposition. Clearly, the secondary calling is helping, and we've got a pretty reasonable bracket at Cologne for the play. And I think they go against Fnatic at a BO1, which is definitely doable. And then they would have to win a BO3 against OG or 9, which again I think is also a very doable situation. So I think that they should be feeling pretty confident that they can build some momentum here off of the good fortunes of, or I guess good fortune is a loose term from the fall groups.
I guess this is me playing devil's advocate, but I can also see there's a very strong way they don't even make it to the play-ins. I think this, like, you know, we're talking about how this is going to be kind of a fairy tale. But for all we know, Fnatic, goes granted, that's a conversation in its own, but they could come in to knock these guys down to lower bracket. And then let's say, a team like Nine, who nobody likes playing at the moment. We also happen to get the RMR with G2 and stuff like that. If they're playing a team like Nine, for example, they're going to struggle just because Nine are just so difficult to break down. If it's a team like OG as well, we don't really know anything about OG just yet. From the Gamers 8 quals, they looked actually relatively competent.
I know enough about that team. I've seen all I need to see.
They look more competent. Yes, fair enough. But they look, from seeing them in the Gamers 8 quals, they look like a more competent team. It's not just Degs to go kill, and if Degs doesn't do that, they fall apart.
On land, they look miserable.
Think it's not Regali?
Look miserable.
Go kill?
It's a bit Regali go kill.
Kind of felt like that in some maps.
I still feel there's a way
ranked in the world.
Like 90 something, because they made a whole big change.
Yeah.
They dropped massively.
Guys. There we go.
Jesus.
But that's just because they replaced the core, right?
Yeah, of course.
Not saying by any means I rate OG as a better team than Complexity, because I don't, but just saying, there's actually strong arguments to be made that Complexity don't even make it through the play-ins. Just because there's a strong argument to say Fnatic should say that first game. On paper, Fnatic are the favorites, technically speaking.
Would you say so? That's another point. It's like
ranking wise, they say yeah, but individuals wise, definitely no. I would say Complexity actually are the better team, but at the same time, we talk about honeymoon phases all the time, and now Mezzi's playing hero roles. They can, if Mezzi plays the way we know Mezzi can play in a hero role, being an incredible rifler the way we know he can be, no longer hindered by calling. There's actually a real strong way which they could beat Complexity in the best 3, knock them into lower bracket. Mental goes boom. We've already spoken about it being fragile as fuck anyway, and then boom, lower bracket's done. And so there's a strong argument to make they don't even make it to Cologne, or to the main stage. That is.
Yeah, that'd be scary. I do like Mezzi on the right lane. That's going to be exciting. But I want to.
But ask,
you go ahead.
It is a brand new IGL and a brand new system, and I mean, you don't know how easily Mezzi will be able to slot out of the IGL roles. I mean, we've had issues with the original OG lineup with NBK, Alexi B, and Valde, who are all coming off the back of IGL roles, and they really struggled calling for a little while when we had a couple former IGLs on the team trying to figure out which side a specific player would call on and stuff like that. I don't think it's going to be that bad, but I do think that stuff like that with switching to a caller and keeping the former caller on the team could actually ruin your potential strategy, at least out the gates. It takes time to kind of develop that system. So I don't really feel like Fnatic is just going to be off to the races, although it is possible. I would err on the side of caution, but that's just.
I'm just saying it's a possibility. We're talking about them making it main stage, and it could actually just not happen here.
Yeah. One last question here for this topic, because you guys brought something up pretty interesting. What sort of IGL change if out of the gates? I imagine like everyone's saying here, JT is probably going to be the piece that would get changed next. I'd have to imagine, like we kind of knew Fang would be out on the outs during this kind of off season. What would you say like the IGL change would need to be for Complexity to get to that playoff point?
I really liked what M80's done bringing over Manx. I don't know how great of an IGL Manx is off of Ecstatic. I think he was all right. He was kind of shouldered into becoming an IGL for that squad after Bird from Sky left. But regardless, I really like the idea of just like bringing over.
I'm talking playoff caliber teams. Europe.
I don't even think it needs to be. I don't even think it needs to be anything special. I think it just needs to be a European IGL that is played through so much tier 2 that he's got loads of just ideas that can work. Hell, I mean, honestly, at this point, I honestly don't know. I think anything could work.
Ooh,
get him here. No, don't oof Bird from Sky. That's a normal.
I'm a Bird from Sky fan myself. So,
well, you think that's going to make this team a playoff? I think it's going to make them a playoff team.
I think
Barry at that point, right?
Barry bomb.
I think at the moment there's so few good IGLs anyway that it's like trying to. I don't really think Complexity can
available.
Exactly.
I think there's a lot of good ones, but yeah.
What's Jerry up to nowadays?
Bring him in. Cloud9 to Complexity. What a journey, Nafany. Maui would love that move. I think that would be perfect.
He'd be a big fan.
I mean, stylistically, it's not that far off.
Don't tempt the offer. Do not tempt the offer.
Nafany to Complexity. I think that's the perfect way to end that topic.
NA org to NA org. Creme de la creme.
All right, good stuff. And here we are with our next topic. As you can see at the top of your screen, it is NAVI was too risky with their 2 rookie pickups. And in this case, I guess I would kind of describe JL still as a rookie. I don't know if you guys would really consider Mad Lions like a big tier 1 team, but I'm considering like JL and Ema because I don't want to take away your Alexi B point that you've got queued up for us. I don't even want to get you started on Alexi B, Neo. But yeah, I just want to focus in on the 2 new guys from like the last Blast Major and the work that they were able to do there. Yeah, so again, I guess we can start off with you, Dinko, because your head's still on the top there. So go ahead and kick us off here.
Yeah, for Navi, I think you have to sort of take into account what they had before versus what they've got now and sort of compare the risk analysis of that, I suppose. And when you look at what they had before, I think they were just one piece away from being an incredible team. You have someone like Electronic and Perfecto. They're 2 absolute world-class players in their roles. I would say not IGLing for Electronic, sure, but in the role of like being the aggressive rifler and the amount of fragging output he's able to deliver. So it's very rare to be able to find anybody to kind of match Electronic's individual level on a consistent basis for the amount of years that Electronic has done it. And he's still pretty young. So you're getting rid of a player that has had so much skill, been at such a high level for so long, and you're replacing him with someone like Ima, who, for me, I would say is the most risky pickup of this team because he's had maybe 1 tournament that matched the Paris major, and it was like a local LAN. I have never seen Ima get to the level he got to in Paris in any other tournament, and it's just that's the worrying thing. And then when he came to the Blast groups, he also didn't look very good. He didn't look very comfortable. And sure, I'm not saying it's an easy team to go into, but I would say it is very risky for Navi to make this move. So I would agree that it's quite risky because you're taking away something that was just 1 move really away from being a good team in terms of on paper. Sure, there's a lot of personal relationships and teams that we on the outside don't know about, and I'm sure a lot of that was leaking throughout the major. You can see a lot of tension and clips that were being shared. After the game, Simple was very sort of agitated, and Perfecto was very despondent, and it was clear to see there was some sort of tension within the team as well, and maybe it had run its course, and in that case, it would have been more risky to keep the current team with the political atmosphere as well. So, from a purely Counter-Strike perspective and performance, I would say it is pretty risky. So I'd put it kind of just in the middle of the green, because you're just risking losing Perfecto and Electronic. They are proven to be world-class players, and bringing in, I'd say JL is probably more likely to be pretty good. It's just Ima that I worry about, and so in that case, I think it's maybe a little risky for Navi.
Yeah. I kind of want to follow up off that there and just say, because I'm kind of not too much on the other end, but I am really putting a lot of value right now on like what CS2 is going to look like, because I think that's going to shift up a lot of things, right? I think it could potentially shake up quite a bit of like the top teams. It's not like obviously like a huge change gameplay wise. Like I played a couple of games on it and definitely doesn't feel like it's not Counter-Strike. It's just I feel like it is going to have like a shift up because of all of the skill ceilings and things like that it's probably going to be tough for a lot of people to transition. So coming from it from that angle, I didn't expect, like, especially like coming through off the break, for it to still be fully like go. I thought maybe we'd be transitioning at some point soon into CS2, but I think that they're making like a right move when it comes to, if they're going to go international, getting some of the newer guys. So I'm going to go slightly disagree.
I'll follow that. I'm going to go probably actually pretty similar towards where Dinko is, just in the sense that I think it is a risk, just because, like you're saying, Ima, we've basically, when we saw him in the tier 2 circuit, he was never as big of a name as he was that one, the major, right? It was kind of a live tournament. Granted, stock value went up, tenfold just because of how well he played. At one point, I think just before the final, he was actually on track to get the MVP before he kind of had a bit of a dud of map mod in that grand final. So yeah, I mean, Ima had an incredible performance in one tournament, but I'd covered a lot of game Elige in kind of a lot of the tier 2 circuits. And generally speaking, for me, Ima wasn't so consistently, incredible in the way it was. I think actually Shuhei did a lot of the fragging, especially in terms of his entry roles. and just getting space. And for me, he was always the most valuable part of that team. Granted, of course, the buyback clause went to Miles. I think if anyone was going to be picked up, I would have liked it to be Shuhei, right? Just because I think they needed a caller to make a difference rather than Immer from that Game of Legion team. I think for me, it does feel like a bit of a risk. I still also don't know about JL's consistency because we've seen him now within Mad Lions. He's been coming forward in towards Apex where he's had these incredible performances and some tournaments he's looked really good, but then these massive inconsistent dips where he just goes missing, right? And he can go missing in series. I think when he goes against kind of some of the bigger names as well, he can maybe feel a bit of the pressure. And there's also the interpersonal relationships. You've got not only now Simple, who, it's a lot beat around the bush. He's got a pretty big ego as things goes. Deservedly, probably the greatest player of all time in Counter-Strike. Global offensive, at least. Yeah, and probably he is. But then you've also got players like JL, who in himself is quite, he's quite an out there person. He's pretty extroverted. We've seen it in a lot of these kind of documentary style things where he's a pretty vocal person. Lexi B is also pretty vocal as well. So he's not really in the conversation here. So I think there's definitely a world in which not only is it kind of play styles and players clashing in terms of their risky whether they can perform at tier 1, but also the interpersonal side of things. It's always kind of been, in a kind of a way, Simple's a dictator of this team, right? A lot of these guys have had much smaller personalities, and he can kind of just boss people about. We saw it even when Sunday Young came in, right, and he was just shit talking the whole time.
I don't know if that's exactly true though. Like with I'd say Simple sure is the big personality of the team, but I wouldn't go as far to say he's sort of the dictator of the team. I would say the Reigns certainly are in control of Blade more than you think.
For sure.
But obviously Simple will have a lot of say, but I don't think he has a lot of say in terms of the final decisions that are made. I don't think he would have selected MPL, for example. It was clear from just if you just read between the lines in the interviews he gave when that sort of move happened, it was clear that he wasn't the one that was happy with that. He wanted to play with SDY. So yeah, I think it's definitely going to be a big factor. Simple's personality certainly is a factor in that, but every great player in Counter-Strike and sports are going to have a big personality and demand a lot out of you. So yeah, for me, it's like, I don't think that's too much of an issue, but the issue I have is, you brought in 2 rookies and I'd say at least one of them will succeed and one of them will fail, just based on
I'm more looking at like these guys coming in. And obviously, JL will want to come into a team as he's always done every time he's joined in and wants to make a difference. He's very big in terms of he always comes, especially his early form. We saw it in Mad Lions, especially when he came into Apex when they desperately needed a change and they came through. He always comes in out of the gate. He's very good in terms of the honeymoon phase we like to talk about. So players like JL will come in and want to be taking a lot of space, getting very good in terms of the entries, even though it's not particularly his role. Immer, that is his role. He's the kind of in a way the hero rifler in this team. I've been looking for a lot of that impact, and again, is someone who in the server, maybe not actually out the server, especially having spoken to him, but in the server is quite a big kind of personality who makes a massive difference, as we saw at Paris. So I feel like there's going to be problems where these guys overlap each other quite a lot, especially early until they really get implemented into Blade systems, so to say, which in itself is also a very difficult thing to learn. I think we've always heard about it.
I don't know if it's implemented in the Blade system, and Paladin, you can agree with or have your say on this, I feel, because I don't know if you can implement the Blade system anymore because you're gone international. So the Blade system kind of, in my opinion, relies upon the communication, right? You're going to have a lot of little minute details, and you take a long time setting up the round. So if one of those threads becomes loose, it can unravel the whole thing. You're going to have to play with a really different style when you move over to the international side. So I think I don't think there is a Blade system to be implemented here. I think it's a new project that has to be built up from the ground with Alexi B and Blade and the whole team as a whole to figure out. And to me, that is, we've never seen Blade have to do that internationally. So that's like, do we see the genius of Blade transition into an international style? That's more of the risk as well that you run for me personally. When have we ever seen Blade run a different style throughout the years in terms of he's always been in these CIS teams, speaking his native language from flip side to here, and always found players that kind of he sees would work in that system and figure out how to get the best out of them. How does he do with this team? How does he figure it out with this new international squad? And that's another risk that is involved with picking up these 2 new guys.
That's the biggest thing that I was worried about is the language change. Is now your cream of your crop, which is Simple and Bit, that you're keeping over. I mean, of course, Simple has played enough FPL and knows enough English to survive. But I've just been seeing so many interviews and just Bit's personality beforehand, before the changes even happen.
Only God can help. That's the,
yeah,
that's the
I know
best
exactly.
line
Yeah, and I'm completely with him. I don't think that his English is very good, and I think now more than ever he's gonna have to have a big handle as to kind of taking proactive roles on this team and having to step up, because if he doesn't, then there's really no point to having him on this team in the first place. But that's like probably the biggest concern for me, is just the language change. And then on top of that, I personally do think it is just too risky to have Emma and JL. First of all, I'll start with Emma. I really did like what he showed at the Paris Major, and I think it's potentially replicable. Obviously not to the same extent, but I do think that there's definitely potential there for him to perform. However, the roles that he was in was like second or third on T side, and he's playing rotator roles on the CT side. So he's been given a lot of resources to kind of just kill weakened opponents, or have a lot of space given to him. And I don't think you're going to get that on Navi. Not with a player like Simple, who's going to want to rotate constantly on the map, who's going to want players to revolve around him rather than Simple play to the strengths of other players. Unless something radically changes in the team and Simple decides I'm going to change my play style, Im is going to have to take a backseat, and I don't know how he's going to fare being a little bit more of a supportive rifler on the team. Because we've seen a lot of different players across a lot of different international rosters where they have to take a backseat and they just don't know how to, and their entire game falls apart. They lose their identity altogether, and then it's really hard to get back out of that rut. I hope that doesn't happen to Emma, but I kind of feel like it is, just because it is such a drastic role change. As far as JL is concerned, I do think that you're missing just a huge potential from electronics entering down to like JLs, which is just like a huge discrepancy in my opinion, which of course it's going to be tough to replace electronic in any situation. But I'm just kind of disappointed that it's JL. I think that I'm not really sure who you would have picked up instead, which is my problem. But like maybe Cypher would have been
no.
Would have been fun.
Cypher. No, Cypher.
You think?
Yeah, Cypher wouldn't have fit into that team at all. JL's way more like, he's even from the sort of the Eastern European region. Like culturally, it would very similarly to fit in, right? So
that's not why Cypher wouldn't fit into Navi. There's no way.
He just wouldn't do it.
He's too much of a wild card, even for UK CS terms. So like, there's just no chance. There's no way they would get on with him in that way.
I have doubts that Cypher will even be able to perform now that he's outside of Thomas's IGL. I've never seen Cypher play anywhere near the level we've seen him. But more to the point of Navi here, and I think it was you, Cole, who brought up the point of focusing now coming into CS2, right? And I guess if you're looking at it from a business perspective of what Navi want, are you willing just last CS:GO major's done? They've had their legacy. They got CS:GO. They got a major for Simple. They made it to a bunch of major finals. They attended all the majors in CS:GO. Navi are probably realistically are now looking to the sort of next chapter. Okay, we've decided we want to go international. Well, they've pretty much got the best players they could have that were available if you're deciding to go international at this point, right? So you've got Emma and JL. I don't think there was any other players that were really on the tip of anybody's tongues coming out of that major that were available, that were pretty cheap. You're buying
probably the best deals too.
Yeah,
I would have
exactly,
to say.
right? So
there's no way these guys are on big contracts at buyouts. Like, get the Game Elige guys especially. That's such a small org generally, German-owned org who definitely went on big buy deals. I mean, they got Shuhei with the implication of, if at any point Miles won and they can buy him back for, again, not that much. So I don't think it would have been too expensive for Imma to what his stock value was.
So yeah, for Navi, these two pickups make the most sense if you're deciding now we're just gonna screw the rest of CS:GO. We're just focusing now with that build up into CS2. And I think even at Blast, you were kind of saying, the system, they have an idea of a time frame they would like to start seeing results, and they've given themselves quite a hefty amount of time. I think it was like 6 months, was it, or something they said? So it's and I think that's fair enough. You would like to see some results then at that point for Navi, and I was pleasantly surprised at some of the performances they were able to give us in Blast. But for me, it's I wouldn't be surprised if we see this Navi team by the end of sort of the middle portion actually of 2024 make a change already. But I don't know who that would be, but I hope it works out for them. But from a business perspective, you can see why it works. But in terms of the Counter-Strike on the server, I think it is risky.
I agree with a lot of what you all are saying with, I think that Emma's the much more riskier pick out of the bunch there. I think JL can come through. I think he might have a more level head on his shoulders, especially when it comes to like bringing a bit of like energy to the team here. But I think for the most part, I have faith in Blade's ability to pick up talent. I would like to think that the picks that aren't just at the major, but like you said with Emma, sometimes it's hard to really imagine that it wasn't because of some of his prior performances. So like you will go back and you'll look at what he's been able to do outside of like that Paris major, and you're like, yeah, maybe it is just that, right? Because it's hard to see elsewhere. But I have faith, even despite the fact that maybe some of the picks didn't work out. Like I know MPL didn't work out as he had hoped for, but I put a lot of stock in Blade's ability to pick out talent, especially when it comes to like players like Bit, who got the move up kind of out of nowhere, and then they were able to get that little mini era of sorts. So where do you guys rate him?
I will agree with the Blade sentiment overall with his track record, but I wouldn't agree necessarily that it was Blade that masterminded these moves. I think anybody with a brain that was a general manager, just look at the last major and these are the two players you want to pick up. I feel like there's probably not just Blade who came up with this, but probably the whole organization from the business perspective. And the JL move, I think you mentioned the energy there. I think that's really cool. And I think if you're going international, he's a young person who's got a lot of energy, a great personality. And I think that's perfect if you start to want to do some content in the English language, which NAVI haven't really done. So if you're expanding in there as well from a business perspective, he's a good player to pick up. Im was also a little bit more reserved in that respect. Mm-hmm. So I think there is some risks here on all facets when it comes to the business and Counter-Strike with these players.
The business thing as well is really not uncommon, especially at tier 1, but it happens all the time in tier 2 when guys get signed that they have a 6-month break clause anyway. Like if things don't work out for 6 months, they cut them and go again. So I would not be surprised if NAVI are putting contingencies in place for knowing, we're on the outside saying this is a gamble. They themselves know it's a gamble that, in 6 months' time, they can be like, right, this hasn't worked out. And they can move them to kind of a bench role and quarter salary, transfer list them again, or something along those lines. It's really not uncommon. It happens all the time in tier 2. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's something that NAVI have thought about in some way as well, especially considering these guys definitely weren't expensive in comparison to what would have been a tier 1 move.
Yeah, I think
Flames is free.
True.
So
and the very few players out of contract these days, though. So to try and get someone like Flames is an absolute.
I don't know if I think Flames is kind of overrated anyway. So.
Ooh, another topic. Oh, hello. Would you rather have gone Emma for Flames? Like, is that or maybe?
Well, I think so. I think Flames has a nicer record than Emma, but I still feel like Flames is too streaky of a player. I like he's got some nice highlights. I don't think OG is the best environment. I mean, obviously, if we're talking a little bit more about Alexi B as well, like I don't think OG is like a game winning or like a series winning team. They just don't have the players, they don't have the firepower for the most part. Sometimes they don't have the calling. It just depends on who they're bringing to some events. A little bit like Big, but it's just I feel like maybe Flames would have been an upgrade, but I still think it would be just as risky if the output wasn't really different. And the final point that we got here today, pretty topical, especially after what we just saw over in the Blast groups. It is okay that G2 did not make a roster change in the offseason. With all the changes that have been made, I wanted to go ahead and get your all's thoughts here on the spectrum about what you think about this.
Yeah, I'll kick it off. Just I have pretty strong feelings about this. I put it more towards a strongly disagree for me, and it might sound like a knee-jerk reaction just off of the results of what happened. And I definitely think it has part of the reason why I feel this way. But I think the biggest plus point of not making a roster move is knowing that you have a quantity that you know what you're dealing with when you move into the new season, and you don't have to make any changes. You can go about doing what you're doing, and that kind of stability can actually really help you moving forward. You should be able to kind of take care of the newer teams potentially just because you are a little bit more well-oiled and whatnot. But that wasn't the case at all. They lost to a Navi pretty actually not handedly. I'll say it was a close 2-0, but I did definitely see like those clutch rounds. Those should be won by G2 every day. Like in my opinion, knowing the core of this roster, I just feel like that should be what's going on. And the BO3 against EG was unacceptable. I mean, the individual level of all of those players
that nearly
were
broke
just
the Counter-Strike world, didn't it? That was nearly
I
like the
know.
Oppenheimer of CS, right? That was that was
What an
exactly.
analogy.
Oh,
It was just like I mean, Welko, the IGL of EG Black, is coming
looking
and
like prime
and
rifling.
yeah, it is. He's walking into like open mid Mirage with no flashes, no utility, anything. Just dissecting, like killing one person in mid window, killing a person on cat, and then killing a person con. Like
Looking
this
like
should
Dinko.
never be happening. Yeah, and I'm like, what's going on? Like, I mean, this can't be happening. And then you always have to look at the kind of past results. And as a premier organization, this year only lifting Katowice as a one trophy is really disappointing in my my opinion. And I think if they want to win trophies, they've got to make a personnel change. They should have made a personnel change right now because I mean we talked about it in the previous topic. Now's the perfect time to make a system change.
Who would you change?
I would change the IGL. I just think that
Yeah, obviously. Okay.
Who are you
but
targeting,
who
though?
would you change him for?
I would pick up Glaive. I think that it's a huge
Okay.
risk to pick up Glaive. But I do think that there's so much experience. I think he knows how to play with bigger ego players. And I think that that's kind of his last hurrah. I think that you can kind of just ride out that experience and see, like, look, now you legitimately have all the pieces in front of you, and if you can't do it now, then you can't do it ever.
I like this, Baldo, because technically you're right. It is an upgrade, right? You get one IGL from Denmark who can't frag, and you replace him with another IGL from Denmark who can't frag right now either. But at least Glaive has all that legacy behind him, right? At least he has all those trophies he's lifted. I would definitely say he's better IGL than Hooksy. So I'd agree with that, but I just don't. I feel like that would be the obvious move would be get rid of Hooksy. And I don't think there was like maybe Glaive is probably the best option that was available, right? Unless you go back to Alexi B again.
Or I mean, if you want to actually dish out money, you try to poach Snappy from Ents, which
you could
which
do
would
that.
always
Yeah,
be fun.
G2
But
has the money for it, right?
exactly,
Or
and
do
that's my thing. Like, I'd hope that they'd have money to continue to be a premier organization and try to win trophies because I just feel like they're the prime organization out of probably all of them to poach another player from another team. You know,
They've just been spending so much money, though. That's the thing.
Yeah, they spent a lot of money in this
building
project.
this team so far to get to this point. They spent so much money, and I guarantee Snappy would be a success. But I feel like to try and get Snappy off of Ents would be pretty high buyout right now with what Ents is running.
No, for sure.
I'm gonna say that it is okay that G2 didn't make a roster change.
Okay.
Because I feel like the option, sure, the best option we're saying here is like try and get Snappy from Ents or go back to Alexi B or get Glaive. These aren't massive, obvious moves that are going to be able to either be possible in the case of Snappy or are going to fix it with Alexi B, who we've already seen is who Hooksy replace. And then also, we don't know if Glaive is going to be able to turn things around either. So for me, it's like if you're just replacing Hooksy, now probably isn't the best time. You probably wanted to get a player like Shuei, but as you were saying, Neo, earlier, he had that sort of Mao's buyback contract or loan contract or whatever he was on. So you weren't getting Shuei. Who else is really available just to make that easy upgrade for the IGL? It doesn't seem too easy for G2.
It'd just be more risks, right? Like you could look at Kixan as well on Apex, but that's also a pretty big risk.
So
what about Jerry?
For me, I think it's okay. No, Jerry, no. But for me, it's okay for them not to have made a move because of that. That's the only reason. I feel like they do need an upgrade, and I think even the players probably deep down know that they probably need an IGL that can frag better. But for me right now, I don't think there is a clear option for them. And instead of wasting more money and wasting more time, why not just stick with this for a little bit longer until an opportunity presents itself? The one thing I would have changed is the system maybe that isn't working. So why don't you change the coach? Why don't you get an actual coach in? And,
that could also work, yeah.
Swanee, sure, they had a good start to this year, but that fizzled out. that could be a move change that I think would be acceptable for G2 at this time. That didn't happen. So in that case, I think maybe you should have made a coach change. But for a player change, I have to say that I would agree that it's okay for them not to make a move at this point.
Okay, I guess I can follow that. I'm in the area of kind of basically, I'm kind of strongly disagree in the sense that like I think there's obviously a very clear problem, but it comes with the stipulation of what that we've already spoken about. There is just no IGLs that they can pick up, right? The big change for me that I feel I still need is just that Hooksy seems to be a liability. To what degree would anybody else be better? We're talking about people like Glaive is obviously the big question mark, and there's massive doubts there already. Even there's probably strong words to be made that his career's kind of done now anyway. Basically, his contract with Astralis is still until 2025 as well. So even if they wanted to pick up Glaive, it's actually not even going to be that cheap.
Yeah.
Because he's on a contract until 2025. So it's not actually going to be cheap to pick up Glaive even if they wanted to. The player that they should have, if they could have tried to go for, would have obviously been Shuhei. Whether they could have out-bargained Mal, or essentially they probably would have had to. Mal, you would have gone back to Mal's and buy him from Mal's, essentially. It's how I'm thinking the business would have worked. It's messy, it's complicated, probably very expensive. Not going to happen. The basis isn't any clear people they could pick up. So I strongly disagree in the sense that, like, I think they should have made a change on to Hooksy. It's just a case of who they make a change with makes it essentially swing the other way in the sense of there's nobody. And I'd rather just have a little bit of consistency in the team, which is something they've lacked. Just have someone locked in for as long as they possibly can. You know, this has always been the problem with G2, just chopping and changing IGLs left, right, and center. They've got the firepower. We know that the system's obviously not working. But yeah, it's just like, who do they go for? There really isn't anyone they go for. I think a blessing in disguise for them would have been if Heroic's financial problems got so bad they went bankrupt, and then we have just randomly arguably the best IGL at the moment, or one of them just on the market there. It seems like Heroic have fixed their financial woes, or I think at least temporarily. So maybe not for now, but there's maybe a world, honestly, if Heroic got so much of the shit that they actually could have started poaching players from Heroic. But that's all stipulations and conversations about money that we don't know about. I think there's no IGL they can pick up that would actually improve this team. That isn't such a big gamble or stupidly expensive, because I don't think Glaive's going to be cheap.
Yeah, and I would agree with that fully. And I think G2 is also the kind of organization that if there was a clear option, they
take it.
They would have just take it and upgrade. But the thing I'm confused about is why you strongly disagree then.
No. So I'm strongly disagree with the stipulation that they should make a change. It's the case of why I said,
so you should be up here on the.
So yeah.
It swings the other way in the sense that because that stipulate. That's what I mean. Yeah. So
I'll
it
put you
swings
right
the way.
here.
Because that stipulation of there isn't actually anybody else that they can go for. So I'm a strong, like, if there was options, it would be as far left as possible. Because there isn't options, I'm way over to the right, just because there just isn't an upgrade that makes any kind of sense for them to go for. There isn't a risk. Unless they start dipping and diving into tier 2. And again,
which is just the same thing again.
I mean, it's just not worth it.
We don't know, like CS2, just wait. Just see who rise up from the tier 2 teams in that. We'll see what sort of IGL starts to peer through the cracks in the new game.
So long to the RMR.
You can pick them up.
So long. They got so much time to work with. I think just ride it out with Hooksy for as long as possible. I know, like, obviously see people like Kassad, big hater. You know, he wants to see Nico do well. But like, if you asked Kassad, who would you change? I don't think he'd have an actually legitimate answer of who you'd actually bring in.
I think he'd say Snappy.
But then there's no way Snappy is not mega money, because Ents are the money making team. There's no org in the world that makes more money than Ents.
Well, maybe they'd want to sell them.
They may not pay him the big salary, but the buyouts. But I don't even know. We don't have it publicly, but who knows?
Yeah,
it's not gonna be free. And Snappy's old too. I mean, you're gonna be buying an old IGL for the future of CS2. That's also short-term risk, a lot of money, and your project is only good for a little while at that point. Then
I think legitimately though, if Shuhei does well, I'm not saying anything under 12 months, but if he does well, that's the dream IGL for any of these big teams. Even when we're looking at Carrigan, he's getting on a bit. The boy's aging. He ain't got much left in him. So some of these these big teams, they're gonna need that young next generation. That's where people like him come through. So I think for G2, if they could have got him prior to him going to Miles, if they could have worked something out there contract-wise, God knows how that contract works. It sounds very messy. Then that would have been perfect. Obviously, Game Elige didn't want to let him go, but they had to. But obviously, that's not an option. So that's the only person for me who, at the moment, was feasible.
I do think that there was another rumor that was like, I don't know how true it is, but they were like teasing the idea of maybe making Hunter the IGL and then trying to get an upgrade elsewhere for Hooksy.
But then they need a good coach, dude. They need a really good coach to keep that afloat, like an actual system, which they don't actually really have.
And when Hunter was on Crazy, he was kind of secondary IGLing with Nexa, which was kind of so-so, which is, again, it's just another huge risk that I don't think is a slam dunk by any means. But I don't know. I just think that as an organization like G2, I definitely think that they'd be hungry to try to win a couple more championships, or at least just go deeper in tournaments. I mean, the last playoffs they made was a spring final, which doesn't have necessarily the greatest format, but I mean, everywhere else they lost to some weird opposition. I mean, obviously the Fnatic one at the Paris Majors is one of the most egregious ones, but even at Pro League against ENCE, that was kind of like the debut, right, for Nerds at that point.
First event, yeah.
Yeah, and so I don't know. I just feel like there were certain situations where I like G2 to go a little bit deeper, and I'm just disappointed on their behalf that they're not at least able to go deeper in tournaments. And they're just gonna like kind of coast.
If Hooksy could just frag more, that would just be sick too.
Do you not think Glaive can frag a little bit more than Hooksy though? Is that
the thing? Is
not
he doesn't
enough?
even need to frag. He just needs to get a 1 rating. Just go neutral, and you'd be fine. They've got so much firepower on that team that they just need him to go neutral. Yeah, but sometimes he is so dog water that they actually can't even carry him.
I feel like Glaive doesn't have a lot of those games though.
Yeah, but it's not even just Hooksy though. Like, come on, you mentioned earlier today, G2 at Blast are losing clutches that they usually win. They were losing these scenarios that when they were on top of the world at the start of this year, when they were winning Katowice, they were winning the rounds they shouldn't have, the impossible rounds. They're pulling it out of the hat, and I think that's where the sort of popular narrative that this team were never really going to be consistently the top in the world. They just had a really good patch of form where everybody was just fragging out, going nuts. Even Hooksy was having a great performance. It's not going to continue, and I think we've seen that sort of transition into today's Counter-Strike that we see from G2. They're always going to be good enough to stay around the top of the scene, but they might sort of hit these peaks of individual form where they're able to win a trophy here and there, but you're not going to see that with this current 5 be consistent because of clear system issues at times, and then also, Hooksy's lack of ability to frag.
All right.
Well, where do you land?
I'm gonna go kind of more towards you, where I think it's not as okay that they made it, because I think there are a couple options that they could go for. Like I said, I think
Glaive.
I'll say Jerry. I'll back that one up. I think Jerry's because he's had success. Like you guys are saying, Hooksy was a problem. He hasn't really has that resume. He doesn't have like the he can
frag better. I'll give him that.
Yeah. No question, he can frag better, but also he can bring a system that I think has worked with like new individuals. How many times has Jerry had to build a system with new players? And yeah, he might have not done it internationally. He's had to do it like in his own region, but I still think that you can bring that. I mean, from interviews, he's been very in depth, so I imagine he has a good grasp on like English communications.
Problem with Jerry is that Jerry is always, his thing is CS speaking teams, first of all. But second of all, they've always been kids where they have to look up to him. They have to give him respect. They have to listen to him. There's no kind of there's no way he's earned the respect of someone like Nico. He's not done enough in his career for Nico to be
he's battled so much to where two young players have had to leave his team because he's been so keen to his system and he's not willing to give that up. Yeah. So I think that he could actually control this team. And plus, I think it's in their style.
The thing about it is, I don't know how. I'll say one point. I don't think Jerry is very easy to purchase and do business with.
Okay.
I don't care about the buyout. I care about the sort of
optics
geopolitically to buy it, right?
Yeah.
It's just impossible to do business maybe with it. And I say that because it's pretty obvious. Otherwise, Zorte would have been picked up by another team, surely, right? And Zorte's just sitting there in the wings. Like he's an easy pickup. Surely someone would have bought Zorte, brought them into the fold, and either the buyout is too high or it's actually very difficult, near verging on impossible to solidify a deal. Maybe we'd have to do what Cloud9 did when they purchased Gambit, which is get an agency somewhere in Norway and then have the team sold to that Norwegian agency and then buy off of the Norwegian agency to then have the rights to the team. So there's a lot of loopholes you have to go through. And is it worth the optics, the the sort of you remember
legal
G2's
fees.
players have had to deal with all of that before as well earlier this year. All of sort of criticisms, etc. So I don't think they're a team that really want to have to go through more criticism, more poor optics, and all the money they're gonna have to spend, all the loopholes they have to go through to get one player. When they can just stick with Hooksy for a bit, maybe a better option comes up for CS2.
That's fair. I honestly wasn't thinking about the optics as much as more just raw for like Counter-Strike ability, you know what I mean? So
Of course.
I might move a little bit more to the middle there with that, but yeah, that's a good point.